video, we're going to try our hand at some practice questions. These questions will be focused upon the sections of the rules that we've already covered so far in the course. Before we turn to our practice questions, I first want to discuss a general approach to answering multiple choice questions, specifically your MPRE questions. And this approach might slow you down at the beginning and during your practice, but it ultimately will make you faster at answering these questions. So I like to point that out because I know this is a timed exam, and I know oftentimes people struggle with timing on multiple choice exams. So when I talk about this approach, they say, oh my goodness, that's going to take me forever to get through a question, and that stresses them out. Just know that yes, it will slow you down, but it will ultimately speed you up. So what is this approach? What we recommend you do is read the fact pattern, and then the call the question, and then you stop. Some people like to read the call the question, and then the facts, and then the call the question. And honestly, if that works for you and timing's not an issue, then go for it. Here, together, I'm just going to read the facts and then the call. From there, however, I do have a structured approach that I want you to follow along with. I would urge you to cover up the answer responses. This way, if you're tempted to maybe take a peek at them, you stop. You kind of remove that temptation. Because what I would like you to do after you read the facts and the call the question, I want you to get in the habit of asking yourself, what rule is this question testing? And forcing yourself to think through that rule. Once you've articulated that rule that applies, apply it to the fact pattern. And you're doing this all in an effort to try to land on a conclusion by yourself. Then once you've articulated a conclusion to yourself, that's when you uncover your answer choices and you try to find one that matches what you just said. The point of this is, first of all, it'll point you in the direction of where your weaknesses are. If you can't articulate the rules being tested, that's a huge red flag. You need to get back into your outline. You need to make sure you have a good understanding of the rules. And of course, you need to work on active review or memorization. If you can articulate the rule, but you're not having an easy time applying it, this means you need more practice and you need to practice application. However, most people do not struggle with application. Most people struggle with knowing the rules or having them memorized. And the other great part about this approach is, remember, these questions are tricky. So if you're in the habit of forcing yourself to reach a conclusion on your own without looking at those answer choices for guidance, you're way less likely to fall into one of their traps. Finally, once you've picked an answer choice that you think best matches what you articulated the answer to be, always double check that the remaining answer choices are wrong. In other words, go through it and ask yourself why it's wrong, or tell yourself why it's wrong. So again, I know that this process is time consuming, but like I said, it's absolutely indispensable for your success on this exam. So that's how we're going to practice our questions together. So let's turn to question number 1. The facts tell us that an attorney agrees to represent a plaintiff in a negligence case on a contingency fee basis. After the client retained the attorney realized that he needed the assistance of someone who was more familiar with the complex medical issues that were at issue in the case. The attorney thus consulted an attorney who had specialized in medical malpractice. The two attorneys agreed that the other attorney would assist with the case to the extent needed, and that the attorneys would divide the fee proportionally to the services performed by each attorney. The plaintiff was not told about the arrangement. Once the case was concluded, the attorney provided the plaintiff with this statement that explained the fee division. The total fee was reasonable. Was the arrangement between the two attorneys proper? So, taking this approach, covering up those answer choices, we know step 1 is trying to articulate the rule that's being tested by this question. So the rule that's being tested here is the ability of lawyers to share fees. So the model rules tell us that lawyers shall not share fees with another lawyer. And then there are 2 exceptions to that rule. The first exception is that lawyers in the same firm can share fees. Now, stopping there for a moment, that doesn't seem applicable to our facts. We do not have any facts that support the conclusion that these lawyers work in the same same firm. So let's see if our second exception to this rule applies. The second exception says that lawyers in different firms can share fees with one another if 3 basic requirements are met. The first requirement is that the fee is divided proportionally to the amount of work that each lawyer did, or the lawyers are going to be jointly responsible for the case. The second requirement is that the client is told about this arrangement and they consent to this arrangement in writing. And the third requirement is that the total fee charged to the client is ultimately reasonable. Here, it sounds like that might be the situation we're dealing with because, again, we don't have facts that support these 2 lawyers work in the same firm. So let's double check our fact pattern to see if the 3 requirements for fee sharing are met, because if not, then this was not proper. So let's double check to see if the fee is proportional. And we have a fact that specifically tells us they agreed they would divide the fee proportionally to the services performed by each. So that sounds good. They're in compliance there. We are also told that the total fee was reasonable. So that's 2 of our 3 requirements. But the facts specifically tell us that the plaintiff was not told about the arrangement. In other words, this client was notified after everything was said and done. So that is problematic. This rule requires consent from the client, specifically in writing. So because this client had not consented to both lawyers working on their case, the call to question asks, was the arrangement between the 2 lawyers proper? You would be looking for a no answer because the plaintiff or the client was not made aware of the arrangement and therefore did not consent to it. So that's our answer. Now we're going to turn to those choices provided to see if one matches what we just said, and of course to evaluate those other choices and to tell ourselves why they are wrong. So let's just take it from the top. Answer choice A says yes, because the fee paid by the plaintiff was reasonable. So A is a good trap answer because it articulates some of the rule, but not the whole rule. And as we learned, this is just one of the 3 requirements in order to have a proper fee sharing arrangement. So A is wrong. B says yes, because the attorneys divided the fee in proportion to the amount that they each worked on the case. Similarly, B is like A. It's a good trap answer. It's a good answer for someone who kind of knows the rule, but doesn't know the whole rule. So again, this is wrong because a proportional fee arrangement or fee agreement between the 2 lawyers is necessary, but it is not the only requirement. So B is wrong. C says no, because the plaintiff was not advised that the other attorney was working on the case. So C looks pretty good. That's exactly what we articulated. But let's double check that D is wrong. D says no, because the attorneys from different firms are not permitted to share fees. Well, D is wrong, because as we've learned, the general rule is that lawyers shall not share fees with another lawyer, but we've learned there are 2 exceptions, and one exception allows lawyers from different firms to share, so long as the requirements of the rule are met. So D misses that point, making C the best answer. Let's use that same approach with question 2, starting with those facts. A family law attorney and therapist frequently referred cases to each other. One day, the therapist approached the attorney and asked the attorney to form a partnership with her. The therapist had a very good reputation in the community. The attorney also had a good reputation and was known as being honest, competent, and giving candid advice. The attorney agreed to form a partnership with the therapist, provided that only the attorney gave legal advice. The therapist agreed to this arrangement. The firm's stationery and website were changed to reflect the partnership and to also reflect the fact that the attorney is the one licensed to practice law and that the therapist was a certified therapist. Is the attorney subject to discipline if he enters into the proposed partnership with the therapist? Okay, so stopping there and getting in that habit of asking ourselves, what is the rule being tested here? And the rule that seems most applicable is that lawyers shall not enter into a partnership with a non-lawyer if any of the activities of that partnership constitutes the practice of law. I'll repeat that. Lawyers shall not form a partnership with a non-lawyer if any of the activities of that partnership constitute the practice of law. And there are no exceptions. So let's be clear about this. If you're a lawyer and you enter into a partnership with a lawyer, no problem. If you are a lawyer and you enter into a partnership with a non-lawyer, the next question is, well, what is the partnership doing? If any purpose of that partnership is to practice law, that's in violation of the rules. Here we're told this proposed arrangement would allow for the lawyer to do the legal side of things and the therapist to do, the therapy side of things, but that they're going to work together. And that's a problem because, as we've just learned, a lawyer cannot form a partnership with a non-lawyer if anything that they do constitutes the practice of law. So this is not okay. So let's revisit that call of the question to try to articulate an answer. So the question again states, is the attorney subject to discipline if he enters into the proposed partnership with the therapist? So I would be looking for a yes answer because part of what this partnership sets out to do is the practice of law. So keeping that in mind, let's evaluate our answer choices. A says yes, since one of the activities of the partnership constitutes the practice of law. A looks great. It's basically exactly what we said, which was a resuscitation of the rule. So let's hold on to A, but we're going to make sure the other answer choices are wrong before we finalize our decision. B says yes, because the agreement constitutes a reciprocal referral fee agreement. Okay, so B is wrong. Reciprocal referral fee agreements is basically a situation where, lawyers and non-lawyers refer cases or clients to one another. There are certain requirements that must be met in order for these reciprocal referral arrangements or fee agreements to be ethical. But that's not what's going on here. The facts make this very clear that the therapist wants to become a partner in a partnership with the lawyer. So B is not applicable. C says no, because both the attorney and the therapist are competent in their fields, and their letterhead and website make it clear that only the attorney provides legal services. So C is wrong. It doesn't matter that only the lawyer will be the one providing legal services. What the problem is they have a partnership, and part of that partnership's purpose is the practice of law. So C is wrong. D says no, as long as the therapist does not provide legal advice to clients. And again, D is wrong for the same reason as C, because it violates the rule, making A the best answer choice. Turning to our third question, handling it in the same manner. It reads, an attorney represents a client in a contract dispute. The case has been going on for 2 years and is set for trial in 3 weeks. During the course of preparation for trial, the client has disagreed with every tactical decision that the attorney has made. After the most recent disagreement, the attorney felt angry and annoyed at the client and suggested to the client that she seek a new lawyer. The client was initially upset, but later agreed to seek new counsel. The attorney gave the client appropriate notice to find a new attorney and then asked the court for permission to withdraw. The court, however, denied the attorney's request. May the attorney withdraw from representation. So stopping there and trying to articulate what rule is being tested. So this is testing withdraw. And there's a few things to keep in mind about the rules. Remember, there's those situations that require mandatory withdrawal, and then there's permissive withdrawal. So let's double check this is not a scenario that requires mandatory withdrawal. So those 3 requirements is if continued representation would result in a rule or legal violation, which is not applicable here. Or 2, the lawyer's physical and or mental condition stands in the way of competent and diligent representation. And again, we don't have any facts that support that here. Or the third instance that requires mandatory withdrawal is if you're fired. And here, that's not supported by the facts. In fact, the lawyer is the one who's trying to fire the client, not vice versa. So this is not a scenario for mandatory withdrawal. So let's evaluate those permissive withdrawal rules. So when it comes to permissive withdrawal, the rules give us a handful of circumstances in which permissive withdrawal is acceptable. And please note that it's not exhaustive, because the rule also notes that permissive withdrawal is appropriate if good cause exists. And I would have to say that if a lawyer and a client are disagreeing so much that basically the lawyer can't do their job, that would be good cause to seek termination of the representation. So in that instance, it seems like what the lawyer is doing is proper. This seems like a good reason to maybe part ways with the client. Now, that's not it for the rules though. The rules go on to say that in order to properly withdraw, the lawyers must comply with their jurisdiction's applicable rules regarding notice and or permission to withdraw. So it's not like you can unilaterally decide to withdraw. You need to figure out what you must do in your jurisdiction to effectively withdraw. Some jurisdictions require a judge to give you permission. Here it sounds like we are exactly in that type of place because the fact pattern tells us the judge is not allowing the lawyer to withdraw. And that's all you need to know to answer this question. Just because the lawyer has good cause to withdraw doesn't mean he or she is done. This lawyer still needs to go through the motions of following the rules to withdraw. And here the court says you can't withdraw. And that makes sense because to give you more context, the facts tell us that trial's in 3 weeks. Allowing the client to get a new lawyer at this point is going to kick trial out even further and cost the client likely more money and waste the court's time. So there's a good reason here for the court to say no. Just stick it out and you can't withdraw. So the call to question says, may the attorney withdraw from representation? We would be looking for a no answer because maybe while good cause exists to withdraw, this lawyer needs to get the court's permission, which was ultimately not given. So taking it from the top, answer choice A says yes, because the client has sufficient time to find a new attorney and agreed to let the attorney withdraw. So A is a decent answer in the sense that it's true. Lawyers need to do their best to give those clients time to find someone else to represent them. But that's not the only requirement for effective withdrawal. It's just one. Answer choice B says yes, because the client's actions cause the attorney to be materially impaired from representing the client. So B is wrong for a few reasons. It's a yes answer, first of all, and we are looking for a no answer. The other problem with this is there are more than one reason to seek withdrawal from a client. Here I would say that this lawyer has good cause based upon the constant disagreement between himself or herself and the client here. And further, it doesn't really speak to the issues of the lawyer going through the motions of getting permission from the court and doing the other things. So B kind of misses the mark there. And lastly, materially impaired is something we normally see associated with the mandatory withdrawal requirements under the rules, which again, this is not a mandatory withdrawal situation. So B is not right. C says no because the attorney's request to withdraw was denied by the court. C looks pretty good. It's exactly what we articulated, that this attorney might want to withdraw but needs the court's permission and was not provided that. So let's hold on to C. And D says no, because further representation of the client would not cause the attorney to breach any of the rules of professional conduct or other law. So D is wrong because it misses the point that there are instances of mandatory withdrawal and permissive. So while continued representation here might not break the law or the rules, that's not the only instance in which you can withdraw. There are others. So D misses the mark, making C the best answer.